Good evening, everyone. Welcome to a special presentation. And I love this particular photo of William Penn. And as you can see, he's looking to the northeast toward Penn Treaty Park, where he made the treaty with Tamanend. And now I'm stuck again. Let's see. Oh, I got to do it there. Okay. So the name of this is The Amazing Success of William Penn and How He Turned a Howling Wilderness into America's Fastest Growing City. And am I crazy? What can I tell tour guides about William Penn? Well, I hope a lot. And I'll tell you, this is going to be like a survey course in college. We're going to cover a lot of ground, nothing in enormous detail, and there will be no test at the end. And I appreciate APT allowing me to do this. And I actually invited myself because I wanted to get this into APT's records while I still can, because we've lost a number of guides in the last year, and I don't want to have something that I spent 11 or 12 years working on just go away. So anyway, that's why I'm doing this. Why am I interested in William Penn? Well, when I first got to Philly in 2008, and I lived in Delaware County most of my life, 3 miles from the border, I thought it was another pay on to Ben Franklin because everything around here is. And William Penn doesn't really get that much credit. But through tour guide training sessions and other things, and when I saw that Thomas Jefferson called him the greatest lawgiver the world has produced, I thought, there's something here about Penn. And here you can see a small version of the City Hall statue at Welcome Park at 2nd and Sansom. The park is kind of overrun grass-wise right now, but it's still an interesting place to be. And you can see the old map of the city. My background, I did around 55 columns on exploring the city for Society Hill Reporter and Queen Village QVNA magazine. And I put them together eventually in a book. And I am an amateur historian. I'm not a professional, but I do my best. And this is a book that I put out in 4 years ago. And it's still, by the way, it was number 3 at one point in April and number 2, I think, in May. So it jumps up and down. It'll drop to number 40, then it'll jump up. But people are still reading it, and I'm happy about that. In my time at APT, I organized 2 Billy Penn birthday celebrations. The first one we did at Welcome Park in 2015, and the next one at City Hall in 2016. And that was really a lot of fun because we had the Quaker City String Band. It was 6 o'clock on a Friday night. They were going around City Hall, and they did start pulling people in. And we had a huge crowd, and we had people looking at their phones asking who William Penn was. So it turned out to be great. William Penn's big challenge. He was given 45,000 square miles of territory to turn Pennsylvania into what he hoped would be the seat of a nation. And so he is probably one of the world's largest developers ever. But he needed more because he wanted access to the sea. So he got James I to give him another 1,982 square miles in Delaware so he could get that outlet. To me, this is Penn's big story. I never knew, but he founded Pennsylvania 58 years after New York and 52 years after Boston. They would have already qualified for AARP before we started. And by 1770, we were the largest, most important, and some say most cultured city in America. I didn't know that. And again, I don't think very many people do know that. Some other things I think I didn't know, and I'll tell you why I look for them in a minute. But we have the smallest footprint of any of the top 10 largest cities in America. We are still the 2nd largest city on the East Coast. But to me, more important is we are one of only 3 cities in the entire country with a big density of 11,000 people per square mile or more. Houston and Phoenix, which have passed us in population, have about 3,000 square miles per 3,000 people per square mile. So I call them territories, not cities. Here's something else a lot of people don't know. We actually bought the naming rights for Penn's Landing in 1970 from the mayor of Chester. I haven't found out how much we paid or where the money went, but I first found out this from the Delaware County, Pennsylvania Delaware County History.org site. Delaware County, though, seems to forget that the first Penn's Landing was actually in Newcastle. So you had Newcastle, you had Upland or Chester, and then you had Philadelphia, and we're the one that bought the rights. I try to tell every tour that comes in that we are still revolutionary. And I think these two dates will say that. In 1959, we began the very first 1% for art program in America, and we've got over 650 pieces. We started it because I just thought Louis Kahn and a member of the DA's office came to Michael von Maschishker, who was the new head of the Redevelopment Authority in 59, and said, they have this program in Vienna. Do you think we could do it in Philly? He said, I don't know, let me try. It sailed through, and that was in May. And then in November or December of that year, Philadelphia passed the exact same thing, or pretty much the same bill. So that if you were building in Philadelphia and you were financing either through the Development Authority or buying Philadelphia land, 1% had to go to art. Only one place in the city fought that, which I didn't know, and that was Dockside. That's the big condo on Delaware Avenue. I forget how many stories it is. It's beautiful. I've been in there speaking several times, and before I did a program on public art, I found this fact. I don't think they knew it. There is public art there now, but there was not in the beginning, and they fought it. In 1984, we began the first mural arts program to stop graffiti, and we've got over 4,000 of them. And mural arts has just done a fabulous job. William Penn's fingerprints are all over our city, and it is a key part of his holy experiment. So he wanted to be the seed of a nation, which I think he turned out to be, and he wanted a holy experiment. He hoped we, I think, would be better people than we are, but he did invite anybody who wanted to come here and practice their religion, and people did. How familiar are you with William Penn? Would you say you know a lot? Would you say you know a little? Or are you in the middle like most of us? Most people I know some, but not all. And I've learned an enormous amount in recent years about things that I had been taught that were wrong. Philly was on Miracle Grow with William Penn because we outgrew everybody in a very short time. He used to say, and I have this later in the presentation, his city grew as much in 7 years as most did in 40, and he's absolutely right. And we also were the largest port in British North America, even though we were a freshwater port that often froze. And Penn was the major reason for this growth. But Ben Franklin was our second. I always tell people that we had two superstars. We had William Penn, who set up the entire city administration, and then we had Ben Franklin come along 20 years later and improve everything he touched. Fortunately, we had both of them. Jeopardy had a question a while back, I think it was Double Jeopardy, who is on top of City Hall? The answer they gave was wrong, but it wasn't too bad. Monday Night Football, and I don't know, we don't have it anymore, but every week they used to talk about Ben Franklin. The wrong answer on Jeopardy was Sir William Pitt, but that's a pretty good try because they were probably thinking of Sir William Penn, the Admiral, and so they got close. But Penn really is underappreciated and overlooked here in Philadelphia. We used to have a week-long celebration of him, and now nobody ever talks about him. But he was a visionary. Because of him, people did flock here. And almost nobody seems to realize, especially people who down Penn, that even the Liberty Bell was ordered because of him. It was ordered by the Assembly of Pennsylvania on the 50th anniversary of William Penn's Charter of Privileges. And that was his charter that said, this is what we expect from you as a citizen, and this is what you can expect from us as your government. And because of that Charter of Privileges, when St. Joseph's Church began saying Mass in the 1830s, 1730s, 1830s? No, I forget which one. Anyway, almost immediately people complained to the governor's council that the papists were saying Mass. They looked at the British law, they looked at William Penn's charter and basically said, and I don't want to use the word, but William Penn's charter trumped the British government. So we were the only place in the British Empire you could legally say Mass. The bell also uses something I never noticed until one of our guides, Dick Furstein, mentioned Philadelphia one night. And I said, I don't know what Philadelphia is. And he said, well, it's right on the Liberty Bell. And it's sometimes the A is superscripted, sometimes it's not. But I have since seen the name on military patches, pharmaceutical bottles, all kind of newspaper ads. So it looks like it was the way to say Philly before we started saying Philly. Couple interesting oddities, and there are a lot here in Philly. Penn lived here less than 4 years total. So he had an enormous impact on America for being here that short a time. His first choice of a place was Upland, now Chester, because it was closer to the ocean and he wanted to be as close to the sea as he could. The Dutch and Swedes had been there long before. They weren't giving up waterfront property, so he had to move on to Philadelphia. And he did pay people for their property, including the Native Americans, although they had a different understanding of property. And I will say right away, he had 12 slaves because I was doing a tour one day from Paffa to the waterworks, and I mentioned William Penn and working with the Indians, and a woman started yelling at me, you didn't talk about his slaves. So now, as soon as I talk about the Indians, I try to talk about the slaves. We had no walls around our city, unlike Wall Street in part of New York, and I think there were some in Boston. William Penn didn't want walls because he said he was going to work with the Indians or the Native Americans. Some say it took, and it was not named for him, it was named for his father, Sir Admiral William Penn, at the decree of Charles II. Penn did not like it, actually tried to go around it, but that's the name. And some people say it took him up to 7 years to get his grant. Others say that's not true. I have no idea. How many people here are longtime Philadelphians? I can't see your hands, but I will tell you in most programs that I do it, about half the audience has been here forever. And if you have been, then you will understand this 1970s billboard. Philadelphia isn't as bad as Philadelphians say it is. I never could understand why we had this terrible reputation until I saw a book by a guy named Thomas Keels on the sesquicentennial. And I think that's why the negative attitudes. This is that book. And let me go back up a minute. He talked about the fact that basically the sesqui was hijacked after, give me a second, the department, John Wanamaker was heading the sesquicentennial. It was his idea, and it was going to be on the Benjamin Franklin Parkway. He died. It was hijacked by the mayor of the time, and basically a couple pig farmers from South Philadelphia who were picking up trash. They convinced the mayor to bring it down to South Philly. Number one, it rained, I think, over half of the time. Number two, this will tell you how dumb they were. We allowed the KKK to march down Broad Street as part of the opening ceremonies. So they weren't the smartest bulbs in the drawer. In addition, when Senator Vare won as a United States Senator, and he was part of this very corrupt administration, he was never seated because the Senate did an investigation and said in Philadelphia, 1 out of 8 or 1 out of 9 votes your odds of getting your vote to the candidate of your choice was 1 out of 8 or 1 out of 9. It was such a bad election. They had never allowed there to sit, to my knowledge. But things have really changed dramatically. So forget about the Sesqui. By the way, before that, we had gold with the centennial in 1876. We did extremely well with the sanitary commission or sanitary fair, where we raised over $1 million. We didn't have a bomb until the Sesqui, but things have changed. Lonely Planet named us one of the top cities in the world in 2024. We were just named the most walkable city and best city for street art. And Citizens Bank Park was just named the best major league stadium. And the accolades keep coming, and the great food, we keep being known for that. So things have changed. I always love the fact that Adam Schechter in the 2017 draft that was first held, I think the first time held outside Chicago, no city has injected that much energy, electricity, and excitement into the draft. The following year, it went to Dallas. From what I understand, they had 50,000 fewer people. I think it was on a parking lot, and I feel like most children, when they first say the words about Dallas, it's Dallas sucks. Anyway, my goals today are to have some fun, tell you some things that you might not know, and help you better appreciate our founder and our city. We're about 17, 18 minutes in, and I'm going to try to keep it moving. What got me started on this presentation? I was waiting for a group from Mumbai one day, and I was looking at Independence Hall, and I thought, what was the city like? What was the typography like? What was the world like when William Penn got here? Well, it was nothing like I was told. And we're going to talk about that in just a second. But let's talk about William Penn himself. He was a planner, he was a promoter, and he was a passionate champion of religious freedom. And he had slaves. His plan was one of the first major planned cities anywhere. The name means city of brotherly love, and we now say and sisterly affection. And I wish we were a little more brotherly love we showed more to each other. He also was a fabulous promoter. He wrote letters to give public notice of Pennsylvania to the world. And the ones that I love are, and this is for anybody who's been in England in the winter and anywhere near London, we were 600 miles closer to the sun, and we were about the latitude of Naples. So we don't have the heat of Naples, but he was painting an accurate, legitimate picture. And he told people, come here, you'll have one difficult year, and from then on, it will be roses. And he was correct. He was passionate about human rights and religious freedom and trial by jury. In William Penn's city, only 2 crimes were punishable by death: treason and murder. In London at the time, it was 200. And he didn't just talk, he acted. He went to jail many times, and he even had an idea for a United Nations of Europe. And I understand why, because when he was young, everybody in Europe was fighting each other, and he knew there had to be a better way. I learned a while back he also was the subject of what I believe was the first fake news story in America. And it was published by a guy in Easton, Pennsylvania. I have no idea why, but he made up a story that Cotton Mather was going to enslave William Penn and his Quakers, that he knew they were coming here, and he was out to get them. He wrote it in April 28, 1870. It continued along. The New York Times has it in their archives in 1907. But then from what I heard, the big kicker was twice Reader's Digest printed the story. I believe once in the 30s or 60s, and then once later. So they continued to spread this fake news story, and it was done by an editor in Pennsylvania. No idea why. My first tour around here, I was taking about 25 young Chinese students. One of my neighbors is a Chinese man, and he had helped a number of these students through school. And I was walking up 4th Street, not far from Pine, and they all started talking to their interpreter. So I asked them what the problem was. And the interpreter said they're asking, why are there so many churches here? Because as we go up the street, you've got St. Peter's on one side of the street, and and Old Pine on the other. And we have all these other churches as well. They didn't have them. And they recognized the difference right away, that there was something unusual about this city. And here's some of the proof. This was done by Joel Katz Design Associates, and I believe it was for the city district, the Philadelphia City District. But they show you a lot of the early churches. You'll see these around town. On one side, you'll see the old Philadelphia congregations, this copy, and on the other side, you'll see copy about the church itself. Let's go back to William Penn, the planner. And I don't know if my cursor will show up here or not, but I'm gonna, so this is Center Square, Logan Square, Rittenhouse Square, what do you call it, Franklin Square, and Washington Square. They were never on, they were on William Penn's map, but he never did anything with them. And Inga Saffron will say that was, she'll make that point that he didn't do it. But for today, they are 5 of the most important places that we have in Philadelphia. And this is something I'm willing to bet nobody on this call knows, or maybe 1 or 2. Thomas Home was not the first choice of the surveyor. William Crispin, who was a cousin of Penn, was sent over here. His ship got blown way off course. He died in Barbados, and that's a long way from Pennsylvania. And so Crispin died. Thomas Home took over, and there's actually a relationship between Thomas Home's children and Crispin's children. And then Northeast Philly, there's a Holmes Crispin cemetery. So that's a little known fact that most people don't know. I discovered this on the Parkway one day. I had known about it, but you can see William Penn's plan up there on the right. And William Penn's city plan is in the kind of like the Historic Civil Engineering Landmarks Hall of Fame, along with the Golden Gate Bridge, the Panama Canal, and the Hoover Dam. That's how important his plan was. And so let's look at it. He wanted, it's just 2 square miles. William Penn wanted 10,000 acres. And he was told by Home he could get that in Northeast Philly, but he couldn't get it in Upland, and he couldn't get it down here where he wanted his city, his second choice. So he got about 1,200 and somewhere between 1,250 and 1,280. He did make 2 of his main streets, High Street, or now Market, and Broad, 100 feet wide, wider than anything in London at the time. The ones that ran by the riverside were 60 feet, and the others were 50. His grid system aided growth. Unfortunately, because his city was only 1 mile deep by 2 miles, some of the other parts of the city didn't grow in the same grid. He used that map to recruit owners from overseas, and he really wanted 1.5 acre lots. And you'll see the ground map that William Penn that is on at Welcome Park. It's a lot more overgrown though right now. As a planner, Thomas Home on his map initially put the names of rich Quakers on the east and west streets. Penn saw the map and said, no, that's not Quakerly. So he named them after things that grew indigenously in this area. Sassafras became Race Street because they used to race, I don't know whether it was carts or just single horses, but they used to race up Broad Street and over Sassafras, but so that became Race. Cedar Street in the south became South Street, and Mulberry became Arch. And I'm going to try to show you why. If you look at this painting, you see this bridge. This seawall, according to Harry Kyriakotis, ran from 15 to 50 feet high. So it changed height, and it's definitely a different height here. So they put an arched bridge over it, and now you see why it's called Arch Street. Also, take a look at this. This signifies the fact that William Penn felt everybody had a right, the citizens had a right to free access to the port. Some of the early landowners wanted it for themselves. Penn made sure that there were these streets, these steps at every major block from South Street to Vine. These are the last ones. They're at Wood Street, but they're not wood, they're granite. or they look like granite to me, but they are the last remaining steps. But he wanted to be sure the Philadelphia public could get to the port. He was a planner. He wanted a green country town, never to be burnt and always to be wholesome. Any idea why? One night in 1660, when he was 20 or 21, we had the Great Plague that killed over 100,000 people. The following year, we had the Great Fire of London, started, I believe, in the pudding shop by the King's baker, and that destroyed 4/5 of the old town. So Penn remembered those things very vividly, and he wanted to make sure they didn't happen to his city. That's why he wanted the large acres. He wanted acre and half acre lots, and he wanted wide streets. I keep going back to this and it doesn't work. His city still has a lot of green today, thanks to his plan. So the four squares that were, the center square was 10 acres. The others are supposed to be 8 acres each. Center Square was always to be a public square. He wanted, or not that he wanted, but the first waterworks was built there. I believe he at one point wanted his market there, but it didn't happen. And now, of course, it's the site of City Hall. There's the first waterworks building at Center Square. And right behind it, or right near it, you'll see the first public first public fountain, from what Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Arts says. His plan, even just because it was on paper, worked, and it works now, and it worked then. What did Penn start with? This is what I really found was incorrect in what I learned. He started with farmland that he bought from the Swanson or Svensson brothers, but it wasn't farmland like this. It was likely woods like this. According to Pennsylvania, a 300-year history, or 103, I'm sorry, Philadelphia, a 300-year history. It was hardwood. It was old growth hemp. No, not this one. It wasn't pine. Everybody initially said it was pine. North of here, we had Kochonic, or however you pronounce the Indian name. They were pine trees, but his city was all hardwood. And so he cut that city out of a forest, and I never knew that. And the oldest Swede that they found to talk to talked about the great forest at the site of Philadelphia. He was at Gloria Dei Church, and he mentioned that the church was 2 musket shots from William Penn's town. I forgot to mention that, I don't think I have it coming up further, when Francis Daniel Pastorius got here, he came a little bit after Penn. He came on a ship with a baker named Cornelius Baum. Baum lived around 3rd and Chestnut. Pastorius lived over near Lombard and the river and Front Street. He couldn't find him again. He said several times he got lost trying to get back to the baker. So that again tells you it was a howling wilderness. And Pastorius said there were 4 tiny buildings. You had the Blue Anchor Tavern when William Penn got there, and a couple of other tiny buildings nearby. That was it. Pastorius said you had to put fencing around because cows and horses would walk right through your house. From that, William Penn developed the fastest growing town in the colonies. And you've seen this William Birch print. The next one you're going to see, to me, is even more significant. This is the oldest oil painting of a city in America. The fact that that New York and Boston were already grandpops when we were born makes this seem ridiculous. This was done around 1918, and it was done a number of odd things here. Peter Cooper, who was a sign painter, painted this. We don't know anything more about him. As far as I know, this is the most valuable thing the Library Company of Philadelphia has. And Cooper even put a legend of who was here, what some of the major people were. Cooper also put himself on the bottom left of the painting just to show he was there. It reminds me of the guy with the Jefferson medical paintings where he puts himself in the picture. Anyway, this was found in the trash by a member of parliament around I think it was 1857, might be early 60s. He gave it to George Mifflin Dallas, for whom some people say Dallas is named. That's my second mark against Dallas. He gave it to George Mifflin Dallas, and he sent it to the library company and said, this antique daub or daub, however you want to pronounce it, might interest you. Well, it sure does. It's the oldest painting in America that we have of a city, and we did it. That grew into our World Heritage City, and the only reason we are a World Heritage City is because we have Independence Hall in our city. And again, I'm not sure you would have had Independence Hall or the Liberty Bell or anything else if William Penn hadn't settled here. He also was very, very lucky. We had large clay deposits for brick. We had spectacular farmland. We had trees for shipbuilding. We had everything he needed here, and Philadelphia boomed. He really envisioned a suburban mainline town. I don't think Penn liked cities. This is a slight exaggeration, but not too much. Again, every home with a space for a garden and orchard, large lots, and out in the suburbs, you'd have at least 800 feet between you. And you could, if you were a big landowner, you got much more territory farther out. William Penn wanted rents. They called them quit rents in London. He thought he was going to get them here, but he gave a lot of people the first couple years off in order to attract them here to Pennsylvania. And by the time he got back, nobody was paying him. He also wanted wide streets, and he felt that that was easy, that it was better for ventilation and that we wouldn't have disease. But by let me think for a second, 8 or 9 years after he came here, I believe there were already 9 alleys between Front and Second Street. So he had a plan and the residents changed it. This is Alfred's Alley. Alfred never lived on the alley, but it is a great street. Ed Major, who founded the tour guides, used to call it America's melting pot, and I think it was. And I love this quote because this surprised me, and it was the New York Times in '84. And I can't read the whole thing because my photos are blocking my way, and I'm not sure I can get rid of them. Anyway, the surprising there's so many of these tucked away in Philadelphia than you thought existed outside London or Calcutta. When I have gone to open houses at Society Hill or Queen Village, I see a number of these courtyards that I've never known were there, and we have alleys everywhere. And now I'm stuck. Let's see. Well, there we go. This was Penn's unique legacy as far as I'm concerned. He left us a city of many nationalities. This is the quote of a Scottish-born physician who dined at a tavern. I think it was 1748, might have been 1742. I can't remember. But no other city in the country would you have found these different people or these different religions in one place. And this is the result that you can see 108 flags of countries with a significant representation here and Puerto Rico. So 109 flags in total. That is the legacy William Penn left. Now, Pennsylvania is still packed with trees. Amazingly to me, 60% of Pennsylvania, or 59, might have been the last count, is still covered by forest. That is fantastic because years ago it had dropped to 35%. So Pennsylvania's been a pretty good steward. And the Penn wanted to call it New Wales or Sylvania, but the king said no, Pennsylvania it will be. Penn's arrival on the Welcome was difficult. It was slow. Many people died on the trip, and Penn had to minister to them. He had had smallpox as a child, and so I guess he was no longer vulnerable and he was able to help. He even changed the law in 2 countries. William Penn at one point was proselytizing for Quakerism in London, and he knew he was going to be arrested, and he and Meade were arrested. And the Lord Mayor of London had him stand in the dock, I think for 2 days. I think at one point he covered his mouth, covered his eyes. He was really tired of Penn. He couldn't get the judgment he wanted from the jury. He kept telling them what he wanted. The jury would not find Penn guilty. So the judge put the jury in prison, in Newgate prison, which I understand did not even have a pot to pee in. It was cold, it was nasty. One of the people that was on the appeal was relatively rich. He did appeal. It's now known as the Bushel case or the Bushel appeal. And Scott Turow, the author and lawyer, said in either 1990s, somewhere around the 90s, that Penn changed the law in 2 countries. So the man did an enormous amount that we don't know about. To me, his oddest honor is we started a Camp William Penn in the Civil War for Black troops. So we named a camp, a war, what I'll call a war camp for a Quaker. Kind of ironic. This is a statue Pennsylvania Hospital did not expect. John Penn, the nephew, had written to Pennsylvania Hospital and said, I have a piece of art I want to hang, and I want you to tell me where it'll go in a prominent spot. The people at the hospital ran around, looked for a spot, told them they had it. The next thing they know, the statue shows up at the port. They didn't know what to do with it at first, so they put it outside. And the rumor around the neighborhood was that Penn got tired of standing there, jumped off at night, and ran around the neighborhood. Mm-hmm. William Penn's real problem. Philadelphia very much might not be his. The boundary of Pennsylvania and Maryland was often in dispute from the very beginning. Maryland started calling us the prettiest town in Maryland. Our various militias crossed the border and fought against each other. The king finally said, settle it, and we did. The Mason-Dixon line ended the dispute, and it was made it 15 miles south of the southernmost house in Philadelphia. That was William Penn's side of the street because Southwark was on the other side. So Mason and Dixon sailed here, found the southernmost house, which is probably under I-95 today, then went directly south 15 miles and then started cutting a path through the Pennsylvania-Maryland forest. And that was no easy job. At one point, by the way, they had to stop because the Indians who were with them, the Native Americans or Indians, said, we cannot cross the warpath. That was a path in the western part of the state that went to South Carolina. If they crossed it, they would be killed. So the line stopped until another one of our polymaths, David Rittenhouse, for whom Rittenhouse Square is named, who also designed all kind of astronomical gadgets, he finished the survey for the Mason-Dixon line. Mason and Dixon's names were never on that survey from what I read, and it was never mentioned until it became an issue between slavery and non-slavery. The Swedes' view of Philly, and I bring this up because I don't know why we have had such a violent past and why we are so split, but we were in the beginning and we are today. And the Swedes said that Philadelphia, for here there are fanatics almost without number, speaking of the Quakers. Because there is freedom of conscience, especially the Quakers, they have gathered together of every opinion and belief. We have every opinion and belief here, and we're not shy about saying it. So we may owe our mouthiness and our reputation to the Quakers. I don't know. Mm-hmm. And it was not all sweetness and light. We had an enormous number of racial problems. We had more race wars than any city in America. Frederick Douglass said we were the most racist city in America. And we were either the northernmost of the southern cities or the southernmost of the northern cities. We were right in the middle, and so were our politics. Major events, we had the yellow fever epidemic of 1793. If we had the same type of, if we had this much death today as we did then, our city is now 150,000 people. I'm sorry, 1,000,005. We would have lost 150,000 people to yellow fever in 3 months in 1793. That's how violent and vehement it was. We built a lazaretto, a quarantine station about 10 miles south of Philadelphia to help us stop this continuing series of events. We had yellow fever epidemics in 73, I think 75, 76, 79. I mean, we had 4 out of 5 years. We had nativist riots and because of that, the city grew overnight from 2 square miles to 130. And they did it because in any of the riots, but especially the nativist riots, the city got tired. They could run across Vine Street or run across South Street, which was out of Philadelphia. You had to get a sheriff, you had to get a posse, which meant they were long gone. So, and also we had a fire department that was out of control. We were basically ethnic thugs, and they would try to burn each other's firehouse down. This will tell you how violent they were. One of the firehouses was simply named the Killers. In 1854, we stopped that. We went with one police force, one fire department, and our city and county became the same. The beautiful waterworks, which we put in trying to find a way to stop yellow fever epidemics, is still very much worth a visit. And Fairmount Park was basically developed to clean up and keep our water as clean as we could. So we did something really smart. We not only cleaned up or tried to clean up our river, we created one of the best park systems in America. Yellow fever, by the way, killed 10% of the people. Almost everybody who could get out of town did. So that when I sit here, it killed 10%, to me, the percentage is higher because something like 35 or 40% were gone. This is the lazaretto that we put up. There's a much better look to it now because it's now used by Tinicum Township and Preservation Alliance, and Tinicum Township and a lot of other people put money in to make this building, make it something that we can continue to use. And there are now exhibits in that building. So that was a big plus. If you look out at Little Tinicum Island, it looks probably the way it did in 1796. Politics moved our city forward, and I will try to be done by 8 o'clock. Front and High Street was the first town center, and Front and High was also where we sold a lot of slaves at the London Coffee House. Later, the center moved to Second and High Street. We had a town hall there and a Quaker meeting house. Eventually, we put the State House, now Independence Hall. We built it all the way at the edge of the city, hoping people would come that far out of the city. Well, they did. And when Sansom Street was done, they actually, paved that street. And I'm not sure who paid for it, but that was the suburbs. And they felt they had to pave the street to, again, get people out of the city. The new State House was also the site of an old Indian camp from, I just lost her name. One of our tour guides who's written a book about, Charlene has written a book about that. Andrew Hamilton is supposedly the architect, and I don't believe he was, but he also was the man who defended Peter Zenger in New York court for libel against the governor of New York, and won. And his case was libel. If it's true, it shouldn't be libel. And he did change that law, at least in America. I'm not sure whether it's changed in England, but we believe Andrew Hamilton, not Alexander, but Andrew is the person who gave us the name Philadelphia lawyer, somebody who was so sharp they could beat the governor of New York. Later, people wanted City Hall moved to Independence Square. I'm glad it didn't happen. This is what it would have looked like. And this shows you that Independence Hall would have looked like a dollhouse. Fortunately, we put it to a vote. The citizens were given a choice of Washington Square or Center Square. We made the right decision and put it in Center Square. When we put it at Center Square, everything went west again. And you can see all the traffic on Market Street in 1910. But we were thwarted. This is the Chinese Wall. this came right up to the Broad Street station right next to City Hall. So we were never going to be able to grow from west at the Market Street area until we took that down. So we did eventually take it down. This is the old Broad Street station, supposedly the largest station passenger-wise in the world at the time. And you can see the tracks going back to 30th Street. That's the Chinese Wall, and that came out. This is what we put in there. All the growth along Penn Center, all the new skyscrapers we have, or most of them, came after we moved that Chinese Wall. Independence Hall was not always treasured. We didn't think about, we were young and dumb as a country. We didn't know we should treasure it. The Pennsylvania Assembly wanted to sell it. They tried to put other things into it. They thought about demolishing it. We finally bought it in 1818. The state complained about the cost, that we didn't pay them enough, and the state was actually going to run a road right through the back of the square behind Independence Hall. Around the time Lafayette got here, either he called it the Hall of Independence or people started calling it the Hall of Independence. And we finally said, hey, we need to keep this building. And now we keep people like Ralph Morano there as volunteer tour guides. Thank you, Ralph.
My pleasure, Jim.
Election day. This was in 1815. City, county, state, and federal governments all were using these buildings, from what I understand. So it was a very busy place. I do know that when the Supreme Court, which I never knew wrote a circuit, they only came here twice a year. And when they did, they went to City Hall, old City Hall on the left. The mayor would move upstairs, and the Supreme Court would take over the ground floor. They worked together. Changing role of Independence Hall. After the really tougher fugitive slave law in 1850, many of the accused fugitives were held on the second floor of Independence Hall, and it wasn't independence for them. And if you were a 6'5" slave and the guy in front of the judge was 5'5", didn't matter. They said that's the guy, and the man was shipped off to the South. So it was not independence. This is a book by Charlene Myers. I highly recommend. She's great, and she's also now a tour guide. This is the first change to William Penn's grid system. And the reason we did it was there was a City Beautiful movement that said cities were too industrial, and we certainly had gotten industrial. We wanted to put in two parkways, one going east and one going west. The one going east would have gone right through our industrial might, and we just couldn't do it. We did go to the left, to the west. And so this was the change. And I just want to briefly talk about the curse of Billy Penn. Most of you probably know that we never won a championship again after 1981, when we had 4 people in finals, 4 professional teams. We broke ground in 1982 to go over his head, and we never sniffed a championship, a pro championship after that. So fortunately, we did something. The head of Comcast put something similar to this, and I believe it is this statue. I'm trying to go backwards and I can't do it. Anyway, he put that on top of the Comcast building. And then when the Comcast technology building went up, he put one on top of that. As a result, we won in 2008 with the Phillies. The Eagles won and we're in the 2017 Super Bowl, won the Super Bowl then, and we won it again this year. So Billy Penn is top dog again, and he's happy, and we're winning again. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm trying to. Oh, there we go. Okay. Billy Penn is 548. Liberty One was 945. Comcast Center was 974 feet. Comcast Technology is 1121. So there you know what the numbers are. A lot of people don't know this about Philadelphia, that many of the people, especially the first year, wintered in caves that were cut into the seawall. And the Indians said they were cut initially by muskrats. We do know that there were 2 islands in the Delaware, and a pirate was hanged at one, and the other was an amusement park. And you could see the 2 islands there. They were cut through by the tugboats. I'm sorry, the ferry boats, because they didn't want to keep going around them. And then I believe they were eliminated around 1890, but I could be wrong on the date. This is an outstanding book on Philly's lost waterfront by another tour guide, and I highly recommend it. 3 of our top exports. Our waterworks. Frederick Graff, the head of our waterworks, consulted with 37 other cities on their water supplies. And of course, our waterworks is in the monopoly board. A lot of people don't know the art museum sits where what used to be a 3 million gallon reservoir of water. But when we dammed up the river and we didn't need that reservoir anymore, we put the art museum there. The waterworks was the second most visited spot in the mid-19th century, only behind Niagara Falls. This is a painting of it. It was beautiful buildings and beautiful surroundings. We went back in technology and increased our profitability by enormous amounts. The Delaware River is a tidal, the Schuylkill is a tidal river. And there were times of days that we couldn't get, let me back up. We had 2 or 3, steam engines at the waterworks. One or at least one of them or 2 of them blew up. And there were only supposedly 3 in existence when we first planned for this. We were trying to do something different. We went back in time and got water wheels. Occasionally later, we had to replace them because they would stick at times when the tide was low. But this is what was amazing. Once we brought them in, the amount of money it cost to deliver 1 million gallons of water went from $265 to $4. And people flocked to watch these water wheels in action. Later, we had to replace them with turbines, but for a long time, these were a huge draw in Philadelphia. Eastern State Penitentiary is among our most copied buildings. It probably is our most copied building. There are 300 prisons based on its wagon wheel or hub and spoke plan. And we'll see in a minute, one guard could see all the cell blocks from a single spot. This is Eastern State Penitentiary. It had indoor heat in each of the rooms, and it had indoor water before the White House did. It was designed to look spooky, so you wouldn't want to go there. And this is what made it so copyable. The guard would stand in the middle here, and he could turn around and see every cell block. And you were only allowed out of your cell into a private outdoor exercise yard once an hour. 1 hour a day. So one guy, if he could take the turning around all day, could keep control over all those cell blocks. That's why this was such a big hit. Market Street is our other huge hit. We didn't start calling it Market Street until 1858, but Philadelphians called it Market Street almost from the beginning. It was the largest market in America. Many tourists who came here said it was the equivalent of those in London and Paris. And according to Joseph Jackson, every American city is indebted to us for our Market Street. He called it the granddaddy of all Market Streets. This will show you what some of Market Street looked like. And those were, and the markets were open Wednesday and Saturday, and they sold just about everything you could get in the entire world. And this is a quote from John Adams, that swarms of people moved up and down the sidewalks and spilled into the streets. At no point on the American continent could so many human beings be seen in such close proximity or in such variety. And I also saw in a book that when the government was here, there were 70 farm wagons on Market Street, probably most of them from the Amish country. Even the bus shelter that we have at front of Market was designed to look like a market stall. There's the shambles in at Newmarket, and there's the bus stall. By the way, I was surprised to learn that in Penn's Market, as early as 1722, there was no smoking. We were way ahead of our time, I think. Other major exports, Baldwin locomotives. We shipped over 70,000 locomotives from the Philadelphia area, mostly from here, some in Delaware County. All this from a guy who was a jeweler who invented a fan to ventilate his jewelry shop, and he developed 70,000 of these. The Stetson hats were the boss of the planes was the cowboy hat in America. I believe you could drink water, you could use it, and you wouldn't lose any water. It had 40 beaver pelts in it, and it was amazing. We had over 33,000 films made by Sigmund Lubin, who was one of the early real players in the movie industry. Unfortunately, and used to film cowboys on Fairmount Park. Unfortunately, the film of the day was not real stable, and even though he had it in what were supposed to be the correct lockers, and I don't know if they were frozen or not, all his 3,000 films went up in smoke. We were the caviar capital of North America. We were the merchandising leader because of John Wanamaker. We were the magazine leader with the Saturday Evening Post and Ladies Home Journal at Curtis Publishing. And we had the #1 female book in America, Godey's Ladies Book, with 150,000 circulation. And every month, I think it was monthly, the women got colored images of the latest fashions because there was a team of women equipped with some kind of colored pencils or crayons. They colored in those. So before color printing, Ladies Godey's book gave women color pictures of their fashions. We've been the Athens of America, the workshop of the world, and the city of homes. We also had a lot of guts and a lot of hubris. Our waterworks required 2 steam engines, and only 3 had been built by then. We hoped City Hall would be the tallest building in the world. And even though the Eiffel Tower and Washington Monument were taller, they're not an office building. We are. Our Centennial Exposition drew 9 million people. It was the second highest attendance of any World's Fair, and most Philadelphians couldn't go because it was closed on Sunday. The guy who, can't remember the name of the man, of the inventor, but he would not allow his steam engine that powered all the machinery hall equipment to be done on Sunday. So we couldn't go, most of our people. 1 in 6 physicians has trained here at some point in their career. I mentioned earlier the mural arts and the 650 art pieces. City Hall clocks are 3 feet larger than Big Ben. And I didn't know until recently, at one point, we used to call that clock Big Penn as opposed to Big Ben. And ENIAC and the barcode were invented within a mile of each other, one by Penn and one by Drexel. And again, very few people know that. Here's a question for you. Does the City Hall clock have Roman or Arabic numbers? Marissa Tomei and my cousin Vinny would have called that a trick question. There are no numbers at all. There are just tick marks, which I didn't realize. Now to more serious matters. Who's on the Quaker Oats package? You have to make the decision. And Quaker Oats came out in 1877, and the name was symbolizing integrity, honesty, and purity. You can see this from 1915. And could it be William Penn? They said no. They said it's a man in Quaker garb. They put out a thinner William Penn in 2012. But actually earlier, there's an ad where they said, here you see the picture of William Penn. So I guess it is William Penn. And our former president, Bob Skiba, is the one who found that information. I wanted you to see a woman who was a William Penn hero. She died in October of this year, and I think she was 94. She spent 10 years and $10,000 trying to get William Penn honorary citizenship in the United States, and she did make it happen. And Hannah and William, I think, were number 3 and 4 on the list. She also got them named honorary citizens, or William at least, in Maryland, which, if you think about all the fighting between Maryland and Pennsylvania, that was even a tougher honor than the U.S. Back to William Penn and his very sad end. He was betrayed by a fellow Quaker. He was ended up in debtor's prison. He tried to sell PA back to the crown. A stroke felled him. His wife, Hannah, basically ran the government for about 14 years from London. William Penn deserved better than he got, but he does live on in the largest statue atop of the building in the world that we know of. It is ironic for a Quaker. They didn't like images of people, and he's on top of our building. That's the photo that CNN used when we were in the Democratic National Convention. Here are some great sources to go to: PhiladelphiaEncyclopedia.org, Hidden City Philly.org, History Making Productions. You can find incredible videos online. The Philly History blog, which they can't send to you for some reason. You have to go in and look at it each time, and it's a waste because it's a great blog, but if you forget it, you don't see it. And BillyPenn.com runs good stuff every day. For what's happening in Philly, go to visitphilly.com. For walking tours, Preservation Alliance, and the Association of Philly Tour Guides. I love to show this photo. It was taken by satellite in 2013 by a Canadian. And it just tickles me that when you see the lights, it looks just like a map of of Philadelphia when you see a large local map. That probably sounds stupid, but I have an odd sense of humor. Here's your special bonus for coming today. And people who have been on here before have heard this. It's an easy way to remember Philadelphia streets from Market south. I went to Market to buy some chestnuts. Went to Market to buy some chestnuts. Changed my mind and bought some walnuts. Chased by a locust, I ran from spruce to pine into a lumber yard. South of it, on a bridge over the water, I saw a girl named Catherine. She was a Christian, and her father was a carpenter in the Washington and Federal Army. So that gives you something that will help you know where you are. And I'll tell you, I use it every day. If you're interested in my book, you can order it at a local bookstore, Amazon, or bookshop.org. It used to be at the Visitor Center. It's not anymore. The good news, a lot of people have liked it, bought multiple copies. It's perfect for parents, grandparents, anybody who loves Philly. And I suggest if you want to read something, I have over 50 blogs up on my site, realphillyhistory.com. And I want you to see this picture because I have one next to it I think will blow your mind. One of my early blogs was about Philadelphia South Street. This is the South Street pedestrian bridge with stickmen on it. This is the new South Street pedestrian bridge that they're going to put up next year. I thought it was this year, but now I'm hearing next year. And the amazing thing is they tell me they're assembling it along Columbus Boulevard, and they're going to flip that up and over I-95 to where the restaurant used to be. I have no idea how they're going to do it, but it looks like a fabulous improvement. Anybody that walks around here and has to cross Columbus Boulevard knows it's a bear. That will be wonderful. I wanted you to see that. I appreciate your coming. If you'd like to tell your neighbors about it, tell your friends. I hope you know more about it now. If you want a tour, let me know. If you have any questions, email me at jim@realphillyhistory.com. And that's an ad for some of the things that have been said about the book. I'm going to stop sharing now, if I can do it, and I'll open it up for any questions. Anybody still awake?
I just wanted to say, Jim, that I just read your book and I thoroughly enjoyed it. I thought it was fantastic.
Oh, thank you. I really appreciate it. I have not read yours yet. It's here on my
Oh,
desk.
no. I'm not saying it.
But thank you. I appreciate it.
I like the way you chunked the book into different topics, and I like the way you kind of said when things weren't sure or when they were sure. Like there were, you might say, oh, well, in the past we thought this, but now we have learned and we know this. I just thought it was great, and I really recommend it to everyone.
That's really nice. I did not put her up to that, by the way. Yes. Thought I saw a hand.
That's my hand.
Cavallari, there we go.
So why do you say Houston and Phoenix are territories?
Because while they have passed us in population, they lassoed everything they could get, and they doubled in size twice in order to get everybody in one city. So to me, the density is what makes the city fun and interesting and important, and they don't have the density we do. So I just say they're territories and we're cities.
Jim Carr has a question.
Yes, Jim, I think you're muted.
Yes. Are any members of the association particularly well versed in giving tours of Laurel Hill Cemetery?
I don't know. That's probably maybe that's something we need to send to our membership in the newsletter. I know there are
Also,
some who do it.
Jim,
Yeah.
Jim Mundy maybe, because he does cemetery tours. I know he does a lot at the Woodlands.
Okay, and there's somebody else I know I can remember talking to, but I don't have their name in front of me right now. But it's something maybe we ask Marianne that. It'd be a good question. It is a fun place to go. I've only been there once, but I like the guy who says drinks at 5 o'clock.
There is an organization I belong to called the Association of Gravestone Studies, and they're having their yearly conference this year in York, Pennsylvania in
Okay.
June.
My
Jim,
hometown.
Laurel Hill actually has tour guides that give tours there as
I
well.
was just gonna say.
And they have an amazing variety of tours too. There's an arboretum tour. There's a tour of the people who were on the Titanic. There's a tour of people who are brewers in Philadelphia. A wide variety to suit everyone's need, not
There's
only in Laurel Hill, but also in West Laurel Hill, Bala Cynwyd.
They also have a tour of folks who are there who were in the First City Troop Cavalry.
Oh,
They do a really nice job.
we do.
And someone just mentioned that they have tours year round. So
Rich, did you have something?
I just wanted to kind of underscore a point that you made, Jim, and you made it very well. I like to say that the reason why Philadelphia was the most important city in America at the time when we were deciding whether to revolt or not had everything to do with the fact that William Penn established the only colony in the country where you had absolute religious tolerance. I read somewhere there, even Catholics from Maryland emigrated to Philadelphia because they found that we had a more tolerant attitude towards various religions. So New York and Boston, although they were our, grandparents, so to speak, they did not hold a candle to the sense of tolerance that William Penn injected here. And I like to add that Philadelphia is a rare city that is named after an ideal, an aspiration, not after a name, not after a geographical location. And it's fitting that a country named for an ideal or an aspiration should be established, should have been born in such a city as Philadelphia. And now I'm done talking.
Well said.
There's the book that we read, The Jewish World of Alexander Hamilton, the author made a point of saying that Washington said that religious tolerance was not enough, that religious freedom was the most important thing. So it wasn't enough just to put up with people, but you needed to allow them to be completely free to practice what they believed.
I also checked the other day, and there were 4 states, 4 colonies that did not charge a religion tax, and we were one of the 4.
just a bit of housekeeping. If Michael could let me know what his last name is and who iPhone 2 is, just so we can take attendance. You can message me in the chat, please.
A little bit more housekeeping for anybody interested. The book club is tomorrow on Zoom at 7 o'clock.
And Pam, you're sending out the Zoom?
The Zoom link will be in tomorrow's newsletter.
Okay.
I sent it to Marianne and Mariana today, so.
Very good presentation, Jim.
Ah.
I enjoyed it.
Yes.
Yeah,
Well,
great
yes, thank
job.
you.
Love it.
Thank you for
Thank you,
joining. As
Jim.
I said, I just wanted people to remember it because I'm 80. I may not be here for another
Oh.
10 years or 20 years. So I wanted to get it on the record.
Good
What-
looking 80.
Well, thank you.
Jim,
But none of us know how long we're going to be around.
Just from your discussions with other people in, I guess, some of the historic areas, what would it take to inject William Penn more into the dialogue of the history of Philadelphia? What would you like to see happen?
I don't want to pick on National Park Service, but I really don't understand why they don't do anything on Penn. They don't seem to realize why they were going to get him out of Welcome Park. Just astounded me. 5 year, or when I started my book and I went over to the visitor center, there was not a single book on William Penn in that bookstore. And there were like 9 different rows of Fart Proudly. I know that's big funny for the kids, but how about a little bit of deference to, we wouldn't have the Liberty Bell here if we didn't have William Penn setting the government.
Well, DEI is very much out of fashion right
Well,
now.
I realize that.
Diversity,
I mean,
equity, and inclusion, of which Penn really was adamant.
except for blacks. I mean, so he had his narrow-mindedness, but he did an awful lot. And they, as I said, they used to celebrate him for a week every year, and now half the people don't even know who he is. And he did a Wendy,
I have 2 fun facts. Last month, Charlene Myers invited me down to Chester. They're trying to organize a new tour guide historical tour of Chester, and we went to see the original William Penn site, and they're trying to get it back. They want the title Penn's Landing back. So I thought what she said about we purchased it was very interesting. And sadly, you may know this already, but the huge, I guess it's bronze, the metal marker there was stolen, and they spent $7,000 recently to replace it, and it got stolen again.
oh man,
Oh, God.
I
And
did not know that.
so there's some competition, Jim,
Well,
for William Penn in
they
Chester.
don't believe that William Penn stopped in Newcastle. Andrew Murphy, who wrote the book that's this thick and came out a couple years
I'm
ago,
just reading that now. Yeah.
talks about it. And I talked to those guys. I said, well, you may not believe it, but almost everybody else believes he stopped in Newcastle and talked about government there, but they don't want to believe it in Delaware County. They were very nice people, but
Yeah.
and they ain't getting it back.
So the second fun fact that I was going to offer is I'm actually halfway through that big biography by Andrew Murphy, and it's probably more than tour guides need, but I'm enjoying it. And he said that one of the reasons William Penn ended up in such a rough place in his life was he was bored by legal contracts. He just skim read them. And he also trusted too much. And therefore, he wasn't really having like a lawyer or somebody like help him with the details. But I just thought that was kind of funny. Like, pro tip, I guess, read our legal documents and don't trust people too much.
There's a professor from Houston, and I don't know why a professor from Houston writes a biography on Penn, but he wrote a really good one. He says that Penn knew a lot of those facts, was told that he owed money to the guy from England whose name just went out of my mind, and that they discussed it. I'm not sure that Penn didn't know. I mean, it's the point that he did, and that he just kind of ignored it and continued to live a fairly nice life. My one complaint about Penn is he writes about children and being a father, and his children were, in my opinion, punks, and in general, and with one of his wives, and I think it was Hannah, he came into the house after being gone for a long time, and the children went running terrified to her mother because this stranger was in the house. So he did a lot of writing about parenting, but he wasn't there very much. So, and he didn't, his children didn't end up too well, and then the others cheated the Indians out of territory the size of Rhode Island. So his ethics didn't drop down to the rest of the family.
I never knew that Penn died in debtor's prison. I mean, who is he owing money to?
He owed money to Philip Ford, a lot of money. Philip Ford died. His wife sued. And at one point, Penn had signed Pennsylvania over to Philip Ford. So there, he was in, quote, debtor's prison, but from what I remember, he was high enough in society that he was at a better prison. He wasn't in Newgate, but he was in effect in prison. I don't know all those details, but it wasn't as bad as it sounds, but it still wasn't good.
Did he
And
die in prison?
I believe he did. I believe. I'm not 100% sure of that, but I believe he did.
Why did he owe Philip Ford?
Philip Ford was his main contact in England, handled all his land deals there, and from what he says, never got paid. So there's a discussion about that, and he supposedly signed papers that said he did owe it to him, and but I don't know what happened.
So basically his real estate lawyer.
I'm sorry.
So basically his real estate lawyer.
Well, he was his man who administered everything over there for him, and tried to get his quit rents over there, because he still owed property that his father had. So I mean, Penn had feet of clay too, but in general, if I look at people as their overall effect, he was a pretty good man, did a lot of good for people and for the U.S. And most people don't know it.
Just to add to the discussion from chat, Bill said that the Philly name actually came from Hebrews 13:1. So he actually got the name out of the Bible. And also that there was if you go to the National Constitution Center, in the First Amendment exhibit, they do mention Penn.
Good. Glad to hear it. Rich.
I think another point that you touched on, but I think it's very important, is because of his religious belief that God is an inner light within everybody, he, unlike the custom of the time, bequeathed his properties, his estate, to his wife instead of his eldest son. And so Hannah Penn, I like to think, became one of the earliest women to hold a governing position in America. Even though she lived in London, she was responsible for appointing the governors who governed on the proprietor's behalf, including the governor who sent Benjamin Franklin on that jaunt to London and didn't pay for it. But so, I think it's important that women even had a role in William Penn's head in as early as this late 60s.
She was a lot smart. She was a lot smarter than he was. I mean, she was I believe an accountant. I mean, she was the money lady. She knew how to handle things. But William Penn Jr., or whether I forget whether he was a junior, but he tried to sue her and take the Commonwealth away from her.
Wow. They weren't very good parents when it came to raising upright kids.
No. Anybody else, or shall we wrap it up?
Jim, just would like to say thank you for an excellent presentation. Just packed with information and covered lots of ground, just like your book. Thank you.
Thank you. Take care, everybody. Have a good night.
Good night.
Thank you. Good night.